Welcome back to the Young Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer McPartland, and today I'm joined by a good friend, Jose Goldner, who works at Briggs Capital. Jose has spent decades in the advising entrepreneurs and companies across industries that include the telecommunications industries, as well as working and mentoring young people, such as Jack Moran, with his Ecological Improvements company. So, Jose, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for having me.
So, my first question is, what originally pulled you into the world of business and entrepreneurship?
I think it came out of necessity because I had graduated with a literature major, and I was teaching at the time, and I realized that I couldn't afford to pay my bills with a Latin American teaching salary at that particular time, and so I decided to go into the corporate world, and I started working in a telecom company. And so that's how I really got started.
And was that your first taste of entrepreneurship, or is there anything before
It was a small
telecom?
company, it was a startup. So, yeah, it was a bit of a taste of a small company growing. And it was back at the start of the internet in the 90s, mid 90s. The internet was just beginning. So, it was really a good time to get started. And because nobody knew a lot about the internet, you couldn't get a degree and find out what it was all about. You had to literally like try work it out on your own. So that helped me to kind of begin at a level that everybody was at, where nobody had a particular advantage in terms of knowledge base because everything was new, right?
Correct.
It's not the same now. Now you go to school, you learn about e-commerce and digital advertising and all these different things, AI even. But back then, there was no formal education for knowing what the internet was going to do.
To follow up that, early in your career, what experiences shaped the way you think about opportunity and risk today?
Well, I think the main thing was that back then, when I was younger, I didn't really realize that I was taking a risk. I just kind of assumed that business was just kind of taking risks. I don't think I was fully aware of the risks that I was taking. I was young, so it wasn't like I had a lot of responsibilities. Like, today I have 4 kids and I have, entire families that depend on me. But back then it was just I was by myself, living alone, so the risk tolerance was higher. Maybe naively so, right?
Correct. Do you think that it's equal that risk and reward both go hand in hand, or do you think that one is more dominant than the other?
They go hand in hand. Yeah.
My next question is, you were active during the telecom boom, which is what you mentioned previously, of the 1990s. From the inside, what did the period look like?
What do you mean the inside?
From working in the industry and as somebody seeing it firsthand.
It was well, if you had a good intuition, you realized that the telecom industry was going through a transformation because the traditional networks were becoming obsolete. So it was the transformation gave a lot of young companies opportunities because IP protocol was becoming more and more relevant and important in replacing traditional networks. So it dramatically reduced the cost of long distance carriers and carrying data, video, voice on converged networks versus traditional networks. So from, understanding telecom back then, you realize like, wow, this is an opportunity to come in with new technology that's more efficient, more cost efficient, and compete with the big telecoms. And that's kind of what I did.
Was that kind of with the companies like Cisco at the time?
Actually, Cisco was one of the first companies that I used. I used their servers. They were actually called the 5300 servers that carried voice over the internet. And that was my first business. So John Chambers was the CEO at the time. So yeah, Cisco was a major player in the space and a company that I used and depended on very much.
So they were kind of your partner a little bit, or the
Yeah,
dependency.
yeah. John Chambers was the CEO of East 76 now. He's retired, but he was a major force in Cisco at the time. Um, you know, he he was born in, I think, Cleveland, Ohio. So we had that in common because I went to Miami, Ohio. And he really started in sales in IBM. So he understood how important it was to open up a market, right? So anyway, I think that because of him, he really took the company to another level. I think it was 1995 when he became the CEO of Cisco.
Looking back, what did entrepreneurs get right during that era, and what mistakes were common during that era? What did people see as things that they got right, and what did people see as things
Okay.
that they got
I
wrong?
think that things that people got right was about um, developing a realistic business model that had a value proposition that was clear from the get-go. But because people didn't understand the internet, what they got wrong was that they went out and raised a bunch of money, and they didn't really follow business fundamentals. They just wanted to grow big fast and didn't really have a value proposition. So a lot of people made money almost raising money versus running a business.
So is it kind of the expand fast and then or grow quickly and then die quickly, meaning you want to get a lot of capital, but you don't want to take the time to grow correctly. You just want to be
That's
worth
exactly
you
right.
have want to have an
That's what was
IPO
happening.
really quickly.
That's exactly what was happening.
And what about the mistakes part about it or the things that people were getting right?
I think that the people that got it right, they understood that there was a solid value proposition, and it was doing something more efficiently than the traditional way of doing something. More cost effectively, more efficient. Like Amazon, he wasn't just, selling books online. He was developing, the biggest logistical retail system in the entire world. So he knew that the antiquated system of logistics could be a lot more efficiently run using the internet and web interfaces to connect buyers to wholesalers. And so he created systems that were very valuable and replaced traditional ways to do business. That's an example of a good way to do it.
Kind of the way that FedEx did it with the overnight delivery for parts in the
Yeah,
mid 70s.
yeah.
When industries experience explosive growth like that, how can an entrepreneur tell the difference between a real opportunity and just a bubble, meaning the similar to what's happening now with AI?
Well, that's what you've got to have a value proposition, and the company has to rely on fundamentals. Like, is the company profitable? Do people pay for the service, and are they repeat customers? Do they consider the service valuable? Is it something that changed their behavior in a good way? And then you got business fundamentals like, can everybody else do the same service, or you're the only one? What are the barriers to entry to enter that market, right? Google was a search engine that had a mathematical algorithm to, basically help people search for what information they were looking for. As in, Yahoo was also a kind of a search engine, you could call it, or a directory, but they didn't have a lot of barriers to entry. There was a lot of people that could replicate the model. And so the market share wasn't protected. So those are kind of things that now you got to pay attention to an AI. Like, what is the barrier to entry to that business? Is it valuable? People repeat customers? All those fundamental things are important in judging whether or not a business is good or not for a
How
company.
would you do it if you were a Gemini or an OpenAI, like a AI company that initially wouldn't start making profits right away?
Well, they're all about grabbing market share right now. So they're raising money to grab market share. Whether or not they develop the barriers to entry, that's a different story, right? You could have, at this early stage in the game, you could have 10 other companies that come after them and do the same thing and even better. It's too early to know at this stage whether or not they are going to maintain their barriers to entry and have something unique, right? Personally, I don't take risks like that because you don't really know um, who's going to remain with the value proposition and who's not. It's too early.
How did you transition into advising companies and entrepreneurs internationally?
Well, I naturally, as an entrepreneur, naturally people knew what I had done in my past, and so people would come and ask for advice. So then that was a natural of inclination to start helping people and then getting paid to help people and grow companies.
So kind of giving up your time a little bit, if you will, and
Yeah, a lot
sharing
of
things.
at the beginning was philanthropic and just helping people.
Correct. Yes. And so then you expanded, I would take it.
Yeah, I mean, I just started helping people, and before you know it, you have a couple companies that are doing really, really well. I've had a couple companies that went into the 20 to $30 million range, and it panned out for everybody. And then I realized, like, wow, I think I could do this again, right? So that's kind of what I like to do now is mentor young companies that have potential. That you have to have a little bit of of the same values, and culture and philosophy of life when you help a mentoree. So that's very important if you're aligned. And so yeah, once you get that underway, it's a lot of fun to help people.
And so I think you started to dip into my next question, which is when you work with founders today, what are the most common strategic mistakes you see early stage entrepreneurs make? Obviously, having the core principles and making sure that the mission statement and the vision for the company is critical.
I think companies are built on strategic direction. I think that most companies that get that as a priority, generally they do pretty well. But you can have a great operation, but no strategic soundness. And so that's a mistake that I find a lot of people make. Like they're good at an operation and they work very, very hard, but strategically the company is not doing something that is valuable. So you can have a good operation, but no strategy, as well as you can have a great strategy and not have operations. So you need both.
Sometimes the efforts don't always give you the results that you anticipate or hope for sometimes.
Well, if you don't have a good strategy, you could do a lot of effort and you're not going to do well because strategically you haven't positioned yourself in a way for people to see your value, or maybe you don't have any value. So strategic soundness in a business is important.
And so you think that that's the most important one that people can take away from that question, if you will.
I think so. I think strategy is the value proposition and your approach to the market and how you're going to make money. And operations is grabbing that idea and turning it into everyday metrics, right? Job descriptions and everyday goals, right?
Correct, but also being different from your competitors, but having it be a small growth over time versus a rapid growth all at once.
Yes, yes.
Now, for someone who's trying to expand internationally, what challenges do most entrepreneurs underestimate?
The cultural nuances of a different culture. A lot of people think that this country is just like my country, and it's not. You've got a lot to consider with jurisdictions, differences of the way people do business. There's an enormous amount of things that you cannot assume when you go to another country.
Is that kind of how we, as Americans, if you will, see the German way of working for more making money versus the Germans who see it as taking the time and redefining the product and making it the best that they can in the market and then deploying that product like a car, if you will.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else on that question?
No.
Okay. You mentored Jack Moran, who I know you and Jack came and spoke with the Founders Club, which is a good golden opportunity. Before he built Ecological Improvements, what did you see in him early that signaled he had potential?
I think Jack was had a lot of humility. He had good work ethic, discipline, consistent. He's a risk taker, hard worker, ability to learn fast.
The kind of learning as you go and not waiting, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. You have to constantly be learning. It's an everyday thing. Doesn't matter how much you go to school or how much experience you have. You have to keep learning all the time.
Now, how much of of that persistency is follow through, whether it's a mentor or it's an email or whatever it is? How much of it is really important to separating yourself from just, let's say, a person who just sends a single email and doesn't follow through or doesn't follow up consistently?
How important is it?
Correct.
Yeah, very important. Persistence is a very important trait in entrepreneurship. Probably the most important is that persistence, that relentlessness, because when you have that relentlessness, you're constantly learning and you don't give up.
So it's kind of looking ahead versus just looking at the days or the weeks, if you will, if that makes sense. Meaning you're able to see far into the future versus just the day by day for how things go. Now, when you meet young founders today, what qualities signal that somebody might actually build something that is meaningful?
Well, it depends on their passion, right? Are they passionate people? Do
Correct.
they have charisma? Do they have, vision, right? Do they have kind of like an obsession with fixing a particular problem or solution? Are they leaders? Do they want to do something that hasn't been done before? So there's a lot of different traits that you can find.
Now, are a large amount of those traits that they already have, or is it the opposite where it's traits that they have to develop in order to become better at their job or be better as
Even
an
if they have,
entrepreneur?
even if they have the traits, they still have to keep developing them.
Now, what about going into a market or having an idea for a company like what Jack did for the runoff for golf courses. How do you pick an idea and how do you say this is where obviously there's a big hole in an industry, but how do you know if this is a golden ticket versus something that's just shallow and isn't really gonna get you where you want to go or become that golden business, if you will? Industry, how do you know this is the market that I need to focus on and this is where I need to go because there's a big problem that a lot of people aren't focusing in on and they don't want to improve things. They want it to be done the traditional way. They don't want a new person to come out. If it's a candy company and they don't want it to be probiotic, they want it to be have all this sugar. Like how do you know if I can come in and fix it and make it better than than how it's being done currently?
I think you've got to test, right? It's all about testing it in the market. It's all about using your intuition. It's all about it's like science, right? You have a hypothesis and then you test it.
Well, I think part of what I was trying to ask is why would he choose an environmental like a category to focus in on versus something else? Like what things stood out to him that you saw that were important for him to focus on?
Well, it's all personal experience. He found a teacher in college who was talking about environmental issues, and there were major contracts being awarded by the government to fix the problems. And it was something that struck his imagination, caught his interest, and then he pursued it. So you got to catch your interest. You got to have something you're passionate about, and then you got to like once you chase it, is it something you're going to chase for, an hour, or is it something that you think you could get into and do it for years? And that's up to you to determine that. You've got to have a little bit of introspection on yourself and kind of understand yourself and say, you know what, this is something that I'm really, really interested in. Okay.
That makes sense. That makes sense. How important is mentorship for young entrepreneurs and what separates good mentors from bad ones?
I think it's very important for young people to have mentors. I think it gives you a big advantage. And I think that good mentors, obviously you have to see what does success mean for you with that mentor. Yet that doesn't mean just financial. It can also mean that you like the person's balance with work life and family, and so it's not just a mentor has many facets. It's not just business. I think you've got to pay attention to the person's values and their ethics and what type of people they are, and like you want to get as close as possible to somebody that you really admire, right?
Now, how much of being a entrepreneur is about focus, meaning having a clear head and knowing this is my, if you want to call it your head is your computer. How do you know this is how I work best and this is what I need to avoid because it won't allow me to be as productive as I want to be?
How do you know?
Correct.
How do you think you know?
By your actions and your emotions.
Like what?
Well, if you consume alcohol or if you consume cannabis or anything that you experiment with and you realize this doesn't work well with me and it doesn't allow me to become as productive as I want to be. Like it gets in the way of allowing you to get your full potential. It limits you and it doesn't allow you to grow your business or to do anything else.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that.
You've seen multiple business cycles. What separates companies that survive decades from those that just disappear that are short term?
Innovating and constantly reinventing themselves and not taking things for granted. Understanding how the market's evolving, understanding how their products are evolving, constantly being customer centric and understanding the way that the market adapts.
Kind of like how Sears didn't really innovate and Amazon fully did.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
For young entrepreneurs just starting out today, what foundational principles matter most in the first few years?
What principles?
Correct.
I'm not sure I understand principles. Like, you mean business principles or ethics or integrity or dignity or
Business principles are things that are important that allow them to succeed.
that your idea is sound and that you're checking your idea with other people that have the experience to tell you if it's a good idea or not.
And so it's kind of like soundboarding it and seeing
Yes.
the holes in your
Yeah, absolutely.
because I know that when you came to our club, you said that you're a loose cannon and that you will have this great idea, but then you will get it. You call it drinking the Kool-Aid, where you think your idea is great, but then you run it through people and they kind of tell you your idea, and then you realize this is not the idea that I thought it was, or that it's not the great idea that you envisioned.
Yeah, that's why you need a sounding board always.
My next question is, and this is from our last guest, if you could go back to the beginning of your career and do one thing differently, what would it be?
That's a really good question. I don't really have any regrets. It's been a great ride. I've made a lot of mistakes. I think um, that the mistakes were part of learning and part of life, and I don't really have regrets, really.
Those are things that you wish that you would have done differently that you didn't, or is it just kind of, looking at it and saying this was kind of how it was supposed to be?
You can always say that I could have done this differently or that differently. I mean, there's always things like that, right? Um, but I don't think there's something drastic that I can say like, oh wow, I wish I could, different.
Yeah, I know. Now, piggybacking off of that question, if you could ask the next guest a question and you don't know who it would be, what would that question be?
I guess I would ask, if you were on your deathbed, how would you want to be remembered?
Would it be the people, or would it just be how do you want to be remembered, like
How do you want to be remembered?
to kind of like your legacy a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. You could make it creative and you could say, what are three things people would say about you? What are things that people would say that would,
Are you still on that idea?
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
you could formulate that question in many different ways, Spencer.
okay.
You
'Cause
know what I mean? But
yeah,
basically, one of the what are things that I'm doing now that I'm going to be proud of the day that I am on my deathbed? I'm like, you know what? I did this right. I did that. I did this.
now, what advice do you have to people who are starting out from the age of 18 to 22 who are wanting to be entrepreneurs?
I would say, don't you in the end, you got to listen to yourself. You got to listen to your intuition. Understand what your intuition's all about. Always make decisions from a position of strength, not weakness. Don't let your thoughts get contaminated with other people. Generally, if you have a strong intuition about something, generally it's right. And even if it's not, you're going to learn from it. So follow your heart, follow your passion, follow your intelligence, right? And make sure that you're obsessed because that's a good sign.
My last question is, who are 2 to 3 people that you think would be great, that would make strong future guests for the podcast?
Oh, I don't have those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jose, thank you very much for sharing your perspective and experience with us. This has been episode number 32 of the Young Entrepreneurs Podcast. If you found value in the conversation, make sure to follow and subscribe. And
Okay.
as always, leave us a review, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you, Jose.
Okay. Bye bye.
Before we go, if you enjoy these conversations with founders, we host small weekly calls where listeners can ask past guests questions directly. If you want access to the next one, DM me podcast and I'll send you the invite.